Hey, everybody. Welcome. We are live here on the Dev Talk Show, and it is Monday morning, somewhat gloomy Monday morning here in our part of the Northeast on September 25th. I can tell it's Monday because even though I have my glasses on and I'm looking for the date, my eyes aren't quite zoned in yet. I almost said it was the 23rd. I hope it really is the 25th
It is.
of
You are correct, sir.
2023. And it's the Dev Talk Show with my co-host, Rich Ross. How are you doing, Rich?
Doing well. Good weekend. Got some time to chill out a bit, which was fun. With all the rain, we didn't get to go anywhere, so it was a good quiet weekend. How about you?
What did we do? So I live within driving distance of the Strasburg Railroad, which is in
Okay.
in I think that's moved over into Lancaster County. Where I live is I can very quickly get to like the Philly area. Well, not quickly, especially because it's trying to get to Philly or out to Lancaster County or maybe Bucks County, something like that. And I'm pretty sure we've crossed the border there. And there's a railroad museum there.
Okay.
And my daughter is in Scouts, and they were offering railroading merit badge, and got to see a lot of history and learn a lot about how locomotives work. I noticed that they continued to call them locomotives during the entire day, and I
Okay.
think she had a great time. And it rained, so it rained like heck. And when we got there, not that I'm blaming, and it's not anybody's fault, the parking lot is on the absolute opposite side of where the entrance is. And so we just kept looking at the rain saying, I wonder if it'll let up. I wonder if it'll let up. I wonder if it'll let up. Well, it's going to start soon. Let's just go.
Right. Got to make it in there.
Yeah. And then I guess besides that, as a lot of folks who know me know, ice hockey season is coming, at least the pros. And so that also means that we're very busy playing hockey. So there's a lot of that
Awesome.
going on. Yeah. So anyways, today we're going to talk about Blazor, which we've been talking about quite a bit lately.
Yep.
And if you've joined us either live on Twitch at twitch.tv/The Dev Talk Show or on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/The Dev Talk Show, all replays are on the YouTube channel. And we've had a lot of people joining us on YouTube lately, which we're really, really grateful for. Thank you so much. Hopefully it's a topic that maybe you're interested in following this journey as we look at Blazor. That's and the version of Blazor specifically that's coming in .NET 8, which the ASP.NET team has announced is scheduled to be released at .NET Conf in November. So we're just about 2 months away. There's a release candidate underway. And one of the things that we're going to do is use the new Blazor, the version that's in ASP.NET Core 8 to rebuild the Dev Talk Show website. And that's been a little bit of a journey. There might be some folks saying like, wow, we've been doing that for a little while now, but that's what we're getting started on. And we're learning a lot about how the new features in Blazor work. And what I thought we'd start looking at today is let's get it out there. Let's get a website out there for people to look at. And this may be very helpful for folks who, I think it's very inspiring when you can go from file new project and then it's actually out on the web. That I think can really inspire you to keep going. It's nice that we have tooling to help us build things locally and work on it locally, but it's really is something else when it goes to like your website at a domain maybe you own or something like that. I think it brings it up another level.
Yeah.
So yeah. Let me think. We're going to look at things like Docker. We're going to look at things like Azure Web Apps, and then of course Blazor. So anything? Any questions before we get started? Anything?
No,
just want to dive in.
Let's just get to it.
Okay. Awesome. So one thing I want to do is I'm going to share. Let's share this whole screen over here. And there we go. So that is my desktop. We happen to be in Windows today. I am confident everything we see here will work in Linux. But because we're in Windows, I have Docker Desktop for Windows. I have that installed. Let's see how much. I really don't think this will be an issue, but I keep asking myself, like, how much doxing am I going to do? But so Docker Desktop puts a little icon down in the tray, which I guess would be over there on if I point the correct direction. And it's also, my main screen is not what's being shared, so you can't see it here. But so these are Docker images, and then I don't have any containers running right now that are already pulled down, or I've created them myself. In fact, I'm going to delete some of them here. So I can use commands to do all this. I could go out to either PowerShell or whatever, and I could use Docker commands to do this. But because I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and delete some of these, mainly because I don't want to bump into the names. I'm going to keep this one, which I don't have to. This happens to be the .NET, the ASP.NET image for .NET 7. Maybe if we have a little time, we'll even try it with 8. We'll see. It should work fine either way. I'm not super concerned about the versioning. But we'll basically see how all of that works. And so yeah, I wonder, can I zoom in on this? I can't. So sorry about I can certainly zoom in this way with Zoom It, but I know the print is really small and not everything has there may be a view setting in here that I just don't know, but that's okay. I'm not going to worry about it.
Yeah. And we're not going to spend a ton of time in
fact,
in that side.
That's right. We probably won't spend any more time in there at all. Well, we'll see. So here I am at PowerShell. You don't have to use PowerShell. You could use command prompt. That would be no problem. I just happen to really like having my Oh My Posh based console. You could also do this. I could open up WSL and do everything in there. I could do that too. I thought about opening up a Linux VM and doing the whole show today in Linux, but maybe another time. So let's see. Let me get some notes up here and let's talk about what we're going to do. So what we're going to do first, I know we've done this quite a few times on the show, but I guess certainly for folks who maybe haven't seen us do this, or just for muscle memory, we're going to create a new .NET project. And before I do that, actually, I bet you the one that I was working on last night is still here. So let's get rid of that. So you know what? I don't know if you know this, but you can essentially like rimraf in PowerShell. You can use RM just like you might in a Linux shell, but you can't -R -F, at least not natively. But they do have a -recurse -force. What's really happening here is RM is aliased to a PowerShell command. I don't remember which one. It might be remove item or something like that. And I think there are people out there who have they've gone into their PowerShell profile and they've aliased this so that they can, especially if you're like a Linux, aficionado, you can just come here and do this. And this is basically just get rid of that and get rid of everything in the subfolders. And it's also, there are plenty of war stories on the internet about how people rimraft their way to deleting the production website or database or app or whatever. So always be careful when you use rimraff.
I would be honest, I've never heard that term before.
You never heard people call it rimraff? Yeah.
No, that's cool though.
I would be interested if a lot of folks watching might say that way out loud. It could be that I'm saying this because, a lot of the terms that I grew up with, and yes, this dates me, is prior to MP3, prior to YouTube. And so all we had in those days was we would chat on BBSs or then web forums, news groups, things like that. So if you wanted to know how to say something, you just said it. And then you'd eventually run into somebody who says it a totally different way, and you'd go, "Oh, oh, well, there was no pronunciation guide. There was nobody doing a TED talk
Sure.
using the term. So you just said it. So in any case, we need a new Blazor app. And I think what we're going to do, just for purposes of this demonstration, but if we have a little bit of time later, we'll go ahead and do this in .NET 8. You probably remember on a previous show, you asked me, let's go ahead and do a .NET list SDKs.
Right.
On a previous show, since 8.0 is my latest version in here, if I do nothing more than say .NET new Blazor, and now watch, it's gonna lie to me. But if I just say .NET new Blazor server, and I'm gonna actually name this Blazor 8, because I think that's what's gonna happen. It's just gonna take the latest RC, and so okay, that's been created, and now the question might be, well, if I look into that Blazor 8 server, and there's my files, what version of .NET did it choose? And my contention is it's going to have chosen the latest. So I'm going to test that out by basically saying, let's look, and I'm using type here. Anybody remembers type from command prompt days? I guess I could have probably used cat. So type was like the cat for command prompt.
Okay.
And a lot of people might remember I'm an old DOS guy, so I still sometimes type. And oh no, it did it in .NET 7. So surprised me. It didn't do what I expected. I thought that it might take the latest, but because I remember we actually had this conversation about how do I get a .NET 8 project, and what I had done at the time for everyone is I chose to say, let's create a new global JSON in the project. And I got a ton of documentation for it, but the .NET new global JSON feature makes a global JSON file. You can say what SDK version you want in there, and you can define your roll forward features. And so I had defined it and then made the project. And what happened is the .NET CLI honored what you had in there. Well, there, for whatever reason, there it seemed to have taken the latest version, which might be the rule. They might say like, well, if you don't tell us, we're gonna, and I didn't know what the rule was, so that actually didn't do what I expected. What I wanted to do is I wanted to show folks this particular way to do this is I'll make a Blazor server, and I'm going to say, go make this over at Blazor 7 app. And then let's bring in the rest of this here. Let's go make it over at Blazor 7 app. Oh, I somehow got Zoom it confused. Let's make it at Blazor 7 app. Let's call it Blazor 7 app, and then use the -F to say I want it to be .NET 7.0. So I could make that 6.0. I could make it any of the SDKs that I have installed. Nice. We're going to end up in the same place. We end up pretty much in the same place, except that this time, let's use cat this time. Cat, I think, works in PowerShell. I'm pretty sure about that anyway. We're about to find out. And there it is, perfectly fine. This would be just the same as if I opened this up in Visual Studio Code and looked at that file.
Right.
Except that we're doing like this. You've probably heard in the last, what is it, the last 5 years or so, maybe a little longer, where we have a lot of talks where people are just like, I live at the command line. I never have to take my fingers off the keyboard, right? Sure. So we're definitely paying homage to that here. I'm very strange about how I do things. I will do things at my keyboard, and then I'll take my hands off and do a bunch of stuff with that. And, it's probably because of the heritage where a lot of DOS, a lot of Windows 95. So I'm really mixed in how I do things. I don't have a consistent view of how I do things in the world. And if it drives you batty, then I'm sorry, people watching, but
I will say I try and keep my hands on the keys as much as possible. So I'm always looking for the shortcut. I'm looking for the, what's the couple of commands to do something that doesn't force me to change positions, as it were.
Yeah. No, I hear you. So I've gone ahead and changed directories to our new Blazor 7 app. And then, just to see it work, let's just run it.
Yeah.
Let's do nothing more than run it. And it's got to build it. And there it is. It's running, and it's chosen localhost 5043. Note that it's not HTTPS. And here we go. That's it. We've seen this a lot lately.
We've been running through this just to show different features and different things that happen in different versions. So
Yeah. Notice we got this little message. Failed to determine the HTTPS port for redirect. And that's because when we look at the code in a little bit, we're going to see the HTTPS redirection middleware is put into the app by default, which basically tells your app, hey, if somebody comes in on HTTP, let's redirect them to the HTTPS version. But since it couldn't figure out what that port was, it just went ahead and served it up. And we don't want that. I mean, even as in development, it's nice that we have this capability, but we can see that already we're getting our browser telling us, oh my gosh. So the nice thing is that's real easy to take care of. So I'm going to hit Control C to close the application. And if I ran it again, but gave it this URLs parameter and say, I want you to have HTTP on 5100 and HTTPS on 5101. This is one of many ways to direct ASP.NET which ports and what URLs you want to support. You can do it at the command line. You can do it with environment variables. You can do it with app settings. There's a lot of ways to get this done. And so I want to make it clear that, like, don't think that I'm showing you the one true way. It's honoring the ports that I set. So I can still get my HTTP version here, except the middleware redirected me to the HTTPS 5101. It did that automatically. So that's kind of nice.
Okay.
And then, of course, I could also... And what I'm doing here in PowerShell is I'm control clicking to get it to just open it up. And because my main window is over there. Wait, it's over there? Yes. That's why I'm having to bring the browser on screen. Okay. All right, so we have our app. That's cool. But let's go ahead and open this in Visual Studio Code. We'll talk about some of the extensions I have installed. So again, if you haven't been following along the whole series, we can sort of catch up. I do have a fair amount installed, but there's some that are important for today and others that are not. I mean, you can see there's a ton of stuff here, but I want the C# dev kit today. Not actually strictly necessary to do everything we're doing today, because C# dev kit is something you log into with your Visual Studio subscription. So if you just have the base language support, that's fine too.
Okay.
And we're also going to use Docker, but we're not going to use it right away. I kind of found it interesting to contrast the experience using the extension and not using it. You can do all this in Visual Studio as well. So here's our Blazor 7 app. I'm going to click on Program CS. As you can see, here's the HTTPS redirection middleware I was talking about. And it's pretty straightforward. There's not a whole lot going on here yet. But what I can't do with this easily is I can't create a Docker container to support this. Because for one thing, I don't have a Docker file to describe it.
Sure.
So let's just add a Docker file. And there's a couple ways to do this. If I didn't have the extension installed, I could just type Docker file. Now, because I do have the extension installed, it recognizes and puts the Docker whale symbol. And it's ready to give me some IntelliSense support. Okay. And so what we're going to do is Microsoft has an image that is it's a base ASP.NET image. And so the first thing I'm going to put in my Docker file is say we are starting with this base ASP.NET 7 image. We're giving it a like a moniker nickname. I think you're right. And we're going to call it base, and so that way we could use that in later instructions. Okay. There's not much more. It depends. Maybe we'll do a little bit more so that we're not piecemealing it too much. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, I want a work dir. This is kind of like using CD to go to a folder that you want the next commands to use. It's kind of like that. And it even says here it'll create the folder if it's not existed. That's good English. It will create the folder if it doesn't exist. If it's not existed, that sounds like a program. That sounds like code. If not existed. So I actually could just build this and run it. Like I could do that. I think I'll move forward a little bit more so that way we're not doing this too piecemeal. And I'm going to go ahead and copy in some stuff. So what's happening here is a second image is being created.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a common approach in Docker. This is the image we're going to use to build our code. But what we're actually ending up with is the image we want to deploy, which is going to be our base. We don't necessarily want, well, actually, we're going to deploy a different image later, so I don't want to get too confused here. But I don't need the SDK in my deployment.
Right.
But I need it to build. So, yeah, so what we're going to do is we're going to do that. So now, let's see, this actually is going to run .NET Restore, run .NET Build. So when you're building these things, it can seem a little mysterious sometimes. Like, how do I know if I've done it right? Because if I do nothing else, but just head back out, and I don't have to come back out to the command line. There is tooling in Visual Studio Code. Mm-hmm. But if I come back out to command line and I say Docker build, and I wonder if the rest of this is from a previous, it's not, let's see, is it? It kind of is. Yeah, I think so. But I don't actually think I need all of this. I don't think I need all of this. I think I can say, let's make an image called Blazor 7 app. Let's call it 1.0.0. And I think I don't need some of that. We might use some of that other stuff in another run, but I think this is good enough. I'm going to tag this build, and I want you to look in this folder for it. That's what the dot means.
Okay, right.
You always have to specify where you want to look for the image, like the contents of the image, and it's here. And it's going to, by default, it's going to look for the Docker file here. I could use a switch to say like, oh, my Docker file has this different location. I could do that, but I don't need that because it's here. And so that should do it. Let's see what happens. Okay, so it's basically done kind of what we said here. Is it created the image, ran .NET Restore, ran .NET Build, exported it to an image. That's done. And if I say Docker image, let's see, I think I want to say ls to list. Here it is, created 14 seconds ago.
Nice.
Hopefully that's readable for everybody.
Mm-hmm. No, that's good.
Okay. All right. Any question there?
So I guess you had to know a good bit of that structure to do what you did inside of a Docker file. Is there another way to do this where,
oh yeah,
hey, I'm kind of new to this. How do I make it work?
Yeah. So I will tell you, and this is the way I learn a lot of things. In fact, let me do one more thing. Let me go ahead.
Okay.
And I'm just going to say Docker push. I'm going to say Docker push, and I'm going to take my brand new, and of course I've got, previous commands that it's trying to help me with. It's helpful because I didn't have to do as much typing. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to say, let's push that up to Docker Hub. You don't have to, that just happens to be because I'm logged into Docker Hub right now.
Yep.
A lot of folks watching might be interested in Docker Hub. We can also do this with a container registry of your choice, whatever cloud you're using. It all works the same. Yep. But I figure this might be, a lot of folks watching might be like, yeah, I use Docker Hub. So since I'm logged in, there's a Docker login, and you basically say, that way that's just done. That's out of the way. So like a lot of things in this world, I actually learned this by a little bit of reverse engineering.
Okay.
Because sure, I learned how to build this myself. And by the way, this is not a ready to deploy Docker file. But to your point, because I have the Docker extension installed, I can open the command palette, which and it's already, because I've recently used it. There it is. If I were to start typing Docker, I'm getting this prompt, add Docker files to workspace.
Okay.
And we're going to use that in just a second. This was kind of I kind of wanted folks who maybe knew a little Docker, but don't know a lot of .NET or these tools. I didn't want anyone to feel like, oh, I have to get all this tooling, but I already know how to use this. And so you can see that you don't need the tooling. I was perfectly capable of doing everything at command line. It all worked great. And I believe I don't think I'm going to have to log in here. Let's see, where's Docker Hub at? Is it going to? Yeah. So here we go. Last pushed a minute ago, it even says 100, last pushed a minute ago. So it's here. This image is here. It's ready to use. It could not be used in Azure Web Apps yet, and it's because we're missing a few commands here.
Okay.
But I wanted to stop because this might be helpful for someone who's maybe a little, like, you kind of know a little about Docker, sort of, but I don't know, right? Is that I found that if I wanted to know what ended up happening on the container, that it was very helpful for me to just like do a couple things. When you try to do the whole thing at once and it doesn't work, it's frustrating because you don't know what's wrong. And what it turned out, some of the things that were wrong is that my Docker commands were not putting files in the location such that .NET Run would work from where I was running it. Basically, I had file pathing problems here, right?
Okay.
They just weren't quite right. And the easiest way to figure that out for me was to say, well, let me back off. Let me back off and do nothing more than copy the stuff out there. Let me just copy it out there and see where it goes. And so if I ran docker run --rm, which is like, what does that do? Well, that means when I exit this session, remove the container. And then -it is interactive session. And then I've got to tell it what do I want? And I want Blazor 7 app 1.0.0 is what I called it. Yep, that's right. And so here I am in a bash shell. I'm in the container. And what that allowed me to do is it allowed me to say, okay, it looks like it copied everything to SRC, and here's what it copied. And let me just make sure that it would all, what if I tried to build it from here? Oh, yeah, okay, that works, right? And so you can imagine that in previous iterations of that Docker file, it wasn't quite right. It wasn't in the right folder. The .NET command didn't work because it said, where's your CS proj? So this was like a neat way for me to like go step by step and make sure like, yes, that step works. That step works. Let's add the next one. Let's add the next one. And then finally, it all just worked. So that's just a tip for folks watching, that if you're having trouble with what I like to call like the whole enchilada, then back off and go step by step.
Yep.
Exit here, container exits. And when the container exits, we'll say, oh, look, I don't have any containers running. Docker container PS. And if I don't feel like learning the commands, I could always use the Docker Community Edition, and images still shows my 1.0 image, but containers doesn't show any running containers.
Yep.
Let me double check what I have in Docker Hub, because I may want to delete some of these. You can imagine, I'm going to delete this 1001. As you can imagine, I have done a fair amount of trial and error. So I'm going to get rid of the images that we don't care about. This is not something you would normally do, but I think when you're developing, it's just like,
it's your sandbox. You can do this.
I'm playing around. Yeah.
Right.
I'm learning. So you asked a great question, which was like, how do I build this myself? So what I'm going to do is we're going to get rid of this Docker file.
Okay.
This would be just as if we built the app and said like, I'm new to Docker.
Right.
So if you have the Docker extension installed, like we were talking about, and I open the command palette, which is either Control-Shift-P on Mac operating system. I think it's Command Shift-P. And then one thing that I found, I don't know if this is a common thing, is hitting F1 was opening the command palette. I don't know if that's a recent keybind, because I thought that was interesting to me. Anyways, I want to use this add Docker files to workspace. I want to use this.
Okay.
So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And you get asked this question. So the extension is not diving into your project and saying, "Oh, I figured out what it is."
Mm-hmm.
So you get asked this question: do you want to use Node? Is it a .NET Console app? Is it one of these Python apps? Is it Java, C++? Is it Go? Is it Ruby? We want the one at the very top, .NET using ASP.NET Core.
Yep.
So what's really cool is the extension provides you some good starting points. And then you say, well, what operating system? Well, I want Linux. And what port does your app listen on? And the answer is 80. My app is going to listen on 80. And then I'm going to hit enter there. And then include Docker Compose. Today we're going to say no.
Okay.
Docker Compose is if we had multiple containers going up.
All right.
And there are many applications that will do this for several reasons. I shouldn't say two. There's probably more than this. Maybe your application consists of an app and a companion database, and you want those in separate containers. Okay. Maybe you are using the sidecar pattern where you have like a base container and you only update the application itself. And so it quote unquote lives in a sidecar. And that way you just push that up and you're not rebuilding the base application every time. Mm-hmm. We don't need that today. So I'm going to say no. And now we've got a Docker file that should look familiar, but has some more pieces. Mm-hmm. You will tell that I was inspired by this Docker file. I just tried to take out stuff that I didn't want to think it was distracting. It's just that it wasn't really germane to the quick demo of hey, I'm building the container. Now let's go run it. Yes, my app is there. It's been built, all that stuff. So for one thing, we have expose 80, which says, hey, we're exposing this network port. You can expose a series. You can expose more than one. I'm pretty sure I don't need, I know this sounds funny, but I'm pretty sure I don't need 443 in there because as part of, could end up being wrong about this. And if so, then we'll just have to push another image. As part of the HTTPS redirection middleware, I think it's going to take care of that for us. This image is also going to add an environment variable. We were talking about how ASP.NET Core has several ways to define what ports you want, and this is another way to do it, is environment variables. And so I could put any environment variable I want here. If I just wanted to have an environment variable here that was like hello, and it equals hello world, that's fine. I could do that. Environment variables are a fantastic way to set settings into your containers or applications, right?
Yep.
Copying the Blazor project up and restoring the NuGet packages, copying up the source into a source folder, building the project. And then this is stuff that we didn't cover in my homemade version. We create a publish image or a published layer. And I think I'm right. I might have really wanted to call that an image. I guess it doesn't matter. And we run .NET publish so that we get the minimum files needed. We don't need everything. And then finally, this is what's really getting output, is I want the final image to have an app folder. We copy the published output there. That's all that's going to be in the image. We're not going to have an SDK. And then we tell the image, when you start up, fire up .NET and run Blazor 7 app.dll. And that's how a web server gets started in the .NET Core, ASP.NET Core era. So that's that. The nice thing is you got all that for you. Mm-hmm. And from my testing, you can just go with this.
Very cool.
You also get this Docker ignore file, which uses the globbing technique to basically declare files that you don't need in your image. Very common to say oh, node modules is sitting in my project. I don't want it on the image. I don't want the Docker file on the image. I don't need the bin folder. I don't need the obj folder. So this is created for you with that extension. And it's nice. Your README file doesn't end up on the image. Your license file doesn't end up on the image. It's not that those things would be harmful. It's just you don't need them. So
Right. Why overbloat the image when you don't need to?
Yeah, that totally takes care of that. That takes care of all that. So at this point, what I could do is I could come back out to command line and I could push the image up again, or I could build it, I could push it, which is totally fine. But I think what I'm going to try doing, and if it fails, then I'll just go back out to command line, is I'm going to use, I have a lot of extensions installed. And so the sidebar here has gotten pretty large. I have to go click here to get to the Docker extension.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see what it thinks is out here. The Docker extension will show me the containers and images that are just as if I was looking here in Community Edition. So it's matching up. It's saying, yeah, you don't have any containers. You do have these two images. And that's pretty neat. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
It also shows me I've logged in to Docker Hub. I did that off screen. Yeah. So it's showing me everything up there too. It's kind of neat. 11 minutes ago, I pushed 1.0.0. So what I'm going to do now is another thing that the Docker extension did is it automatically created a Docker.NET launch task. So unlike if you've used a lot of ASP.NET Core in Visual Studio Code, you're used to seeing the web launch and the attach debugging. Docker.NET launch basically says, okay, go ahead and build an image and then launch that and let's debug in there. And so you can see all the commands are coming up. It exported to an image called, it's coming up very quickly and it's done. Like it just all happened for me. And it ran it on 32.768 and it's working and everything's great. And so that's working as expected. But it happened so quickly that we did not see that it basically runs Docker image build, and then it runs Docker container run, and then with a whole mess of parameters that basically mount the image in such a way that VS Code can attach to it. And so you get this pretty cool experience where, in fact, let me kill this. I don't think I needed to kill it. I think I could have run it again, or I could have just kept the browser open. That might have been the smarter move. But when the browser comes back up, I can, because I have full Visual Studio Code support, I can go find, I'm running in a container. I can go set a breakpoint here and then head back out. And our breakpoint is caught in the container. That's what this whole mess was for. Docker container run with a lot of stuff is the magic behind that. So
nice.
Okay. I was willing to let that be magic. I think folks who know the show know that I like to dig behind the magic, and that was one of the things where I'm like, okay, that's fine. That can be magical. So now, yeah, go ahead.
You'll accept a certain amount of black boxing.
Yeah, and Scott Hanselman has a whole article on that, on how far down the abstraction do you want to go. It's a blog post of his from a few years ago. So let's go back to the Docker. We'll use the Docker extension, and I have this container called dev here. It's funny that it says that it's from 5 days ago. I'm pretty sure it's the image that we just created. Yes. So what happens here is the Docker extension is creating an image and it's tagging it Blazor 7 app dev. It'll keep overwriting that as we make changes to the app.
Okay.
But what I want to do is I want to push that particular version out to Docker Hub so that we can use it with Azure Web Apps. And when I say push, it says, well, what namespace do you want? Well, my repository namespace is my username. And then what do you want to tag it? I don't really want to tag it dev.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do is we called the first one 1.0. So I'll call this one 1.0.1. Use whatever naming or numbering system you like.
Right.
I hit enter, and I think it was that. Oh no, it's doing stuff right now. It's complaining. One of my C# extensions complaining. So in any case, we see the terminal is doing work, and it's Docker image push, and then I think if I come back to the registry and I refresh it real quick, there it is. A few seconds ago, 1.0.1 was pushed. So the extension is keeping track. I come to the website. It's going to be here. There it is. This is a ready-to-go container that we could deploy. We could just send it out to Azure Web Apps, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wherever you want to run it.
Yeah, that's right. Anywhere you want to go. So do you want to do that in the portal? It doesn't take too long to do in the portal.
No, it's good to show things in the portal.
Yeah, and then I'll show you that you don't have to use the portal. There
you go.
That's okay.
Which is my default, but I agree.
You know what I like to say is friends don't let friends use the portal. But I don't really, of course you use the portal, I think, to learn. And then you go from there. So I already have this resource group, test Blazor app RG. I think we won't use that today, which means I'll have to double check all of the commands that I might copy rotely, even though I've been typing them, most of the weekend. Let's create a resource group, and we will call it BTS Blazor app, and I'll put -RG at the end.
Okay.
Hopefully that's easy to see there. We'll leave it in East US. Resource groups in Azure. A lot of people wonder what is this for? It's a collection of Azure resources, right?
Yeah, I mean, everything you create in Azure has to go inside of some resource group somewhere.
Right. And so, it's just a place that holds other resources. I get asked the question a lot, or a lot of people, I believe, mistakenly think that if you put a resource group in a region and you put the resources in other regions, that you'll have problems. But I don't think that's true.
It is not. So the only reason there's a region associated with that, well, there's a couple of reasons, but one is that is where the metadata for the definition of the resource group resides. Yeah, so we got to place it somewhere in the Azure structure. It also, when you're doing things like bicep templates, you can take advantage of that and say, I know we're deploying inside of this resource group that already exists. So all of the assets in here, just use the location of the resource group wherever it is, right? You don't have to, you can always override it, but that gives you a nice little hook into just wherever that is defined.
Right. And as a developer, when you're learning to use Azure, bundling everything you're doing into one resource group is nice, because then I'll just delete the resource group later and it all goes away. That's
absolutely
nice. So I'm going to just create it, and there really isn't, that's pretty easy, and it should be pretty quick. And let's see, TDTS Blazor app RG. Here we go. Here's a resource group. There's nothing in there. So basically it's ready. But the next thing we need since we're making an Azure web app, we also need an app service plan. The portal lets me do all that at once.
Right.
So I'm going to go ahead and say create. And I just clicked on, I could click on create a million places in the Azure portal. I could click it here, create a resource. I just clicked on it because I happen to see it in front of me. And I'm going to type web app. And, I haven't clicked on this web app for containers. I've just been clicking here on web app. I don't know if this was just hey, let's make sure people understand that you could use a container. But web app has worked fine for me. So I'm going to go ahead and say that I want a web app. That's just this is where I really wanted to get to, was create the web app in the portal. And it happened to pick up the latest resource group, which is nice. Didn't have to do that, but it did. And let's give this a name. BTS Blazor app. I'm just gonna use the same name, and look, it's available. You never know. But I'm gonna say, instead of publishing code, we're publishing a Docker container.
Right.
And it's from Linux, and the region is US. And then it says, well, what app service plan do you want to use? And so now we get to talk about app service plans. And my interpretation of an app service plan, not strictly correct, is that you can think of this as the web server.
Sure.
because you can put multiple apps into an app service plan.
Yep.
And then if you were to delete the app service plan, it would be like throwing the server away.
Kind of, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
the only thing, may not be the major requirement is that when I say, hey, I want a new, when I'm creating my web app, and I say, hey, I want this to be Linux, now I can go ahead and deploy it to my app services that are running Linux. Whereas if I switch that box to Windows, it's going to say, well, you can only deploy an app service plan that's running Windows,
Yes.
right? So
right.
That's really the only distinction between whether or not your app can go on an existing app service plan.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. And I think the reason I use that analogy is because there are different plans, and different plans have different capabilities, such as how many apps you're allowed to pack on it, or just frankly, the vCPU and memory and IO, all that stuff is based on the plan.
Yep.
So even though it's not technically true that it is your web server, because it also scales out, I've always thought, like, in my head, that it's super easy for me to just think like, well, that's the box. And so it's either a Linux box or it's a Windows box.
Yep.
And if I want to get rid of the app service plan, then in true Nick Offerman fashion, I can just delete the app service plan. and then I don't have to worry about it anymore. The web app goes away, and and it's great. That's the most, he would love the cloud.
Yes. It does warn you if you have multiple web apps on there. So
it
if
does.
you have,
yeah.
So you don't feel like one button and I could get rid of my entire infrastructure. There are some safety precautions as you do those things.
I love how, like, I'm like, burn everything down.
Right.
And Rich says, now hold on. We do help you from
you
shooting
can,
yourself in
but
the foot.
exactly.
So I'm not going to use the same app service plan that I've been testing in. So I'm going to create a new one. And oddly enough, it's funny how IntelliSense keeps thinking that I want like a family member's name there. So we'll say TDTS's, let's just call it TDTS's app service plan. That's fine with me. But since I'm going to use basic, I'm going to go ahead and say that it's basic. I don't need anything more powerful. Oh, it didn't do it. I think it's because I clicked away. Oh man, I think it's lame that IntelliSense is trying to. Let's see, app service plan, and then I said that I wanted it to be B1. Okay, so, and those are just little markers for me to remember. And then of course it's like, you want premium, right? And it's like, no, I don't need premium. Basic will be fine for this. Basic, if I remember correctly, Basic allows you to pack 10 web apps on your app service plan. And so that's a tip a lot of people don't know, is don't just go making new app service plans. Like, think about your packing, but if you want to pack multiple app services together, you can do like 100 on a standard, I'm pretty sure, and 10 on a basic, I think is correct.
Yeah, I always say, let's look at the SKUs, because those numbers change and my memory is not that good anymore. So
no, I agree that I forget. But so the next step is Docker. And here they're saying, well, what do you want to deploy? And if you just want to see this work, it's automatically set up to the quick start container, which we don't need. I want to pull something from Docker Hub. As you can see, they've already got Azure Container Registry in here, and that works fine too. Or your own registry. It just doesn't matter. This is a public image, and the tag is, because I'm going to be this lazy, and also because my dog seems to want me to pet him right now, I'm going to cut and paste and say, let's use that 1.0.1. I don't need to put a startup command in at all, because there's already an entry point defined.
Yep.
There is a show from our past.
Oh no.
Where we struggled with this startup command for an hour.
Oh no, that's a show.
Yeah, there it was a show, and it was back in the, when we were in the studio and everything a long time ago.
Okay.
That show exists, so
this should get rid of anything, folks.
Yeah, this should be it. So I'm going to click create here, and this shouldn't take very long. I do recall the web apps deploy pretty quickly. Yep. So
while it's deploying, one little comment: you had Docker Hub and Azure Container Registry.
Yep.
And then I guess you probably be able to connect to it under private, but GitHub also has
Hmm.
the ability to create images and use them as an image. Their packaging component of GitHub could be another place where your images reside.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Awesome. So yeah, it's done. And it says go to resource. So I'm going to go to the resource. And here we are, TDTS Blazor app in this resource group. And so a couple things you can do that I found interesting here. One is that if you go to Deployment Center
Mm-hmm.
and you click on, so a lot of this, what you're seeing now is how did Chris figure out what was wrong? And so if you go to Deployment Center and you go to logs, it will show you the logs from the container's provisioning phase. And if you make a mistake, such as put in, maybe you get the tag wrong,
Mm-hmm.
which I did several times. Oh, that's interesting that I'm not seeing logs here. That surprises me,
Mm.
because it would show you that, like, oh, hey, that wasn't found, and then it also does show you, yep, I pulled the image. So I'm really surprised about that. But what I'm going to do here is click default domain, just because it's here. And now watch, I've done something wrong and this isn't going to work. Makes me wonder if I really needed that expose 443, but we are about to find out. Or maybe it's still pulling the images. That
That
the
could be
thing
it.
about it, though, is that I feel like logs showed me that phase, but here it is, pulling
Yep.
image. It did find it. So I've made a mistake in this tag. I
Okay.
didn't do it today, but I have made a mistake. And when I've made that mistake, you just get a whole bunch of error, like this isn't found, it's not going to work, nothing's working, everything's terrible. And so we're still seeing pull complete. So I think you see the web app's not up yet. But let's see. It's also possible that I really did need to. Let's see what we got here. So download pull image successful, logging's not enabled, stopping site because it failed during startup. That could be because I tried to run it early, then starting the container, initiating warm-up request. Is it because I tried to run it early? Or did I really goof and I needed one more port in that list? And it's just something that I didn't put in my notes and I forgot about since last night. So, because that was the last time I did this before I went to bed, I said, let me run through this one more time.
Mm-hmm.
Because I always tell myself, let me make sure the notes are good. And then it turns out that I may have forgotten that. And I even thought that I might have messed that up too. But head back to deployment center. I expected one more entry in the logs that said that this warm-up request was successful. And see, we're not getting that. So let's do this again. And we will, let's see, let's go to the Docker file. And we'll say expose 443. Let's not get that wrong.
Okay. I mean, you could put that on the same line, right?
I could. Yeah. I think
I
you
think
can
it's just
do
space.
this.
I didn't
Right?
even think it needed a comma. It's just a space.
You're probably right. Yeah, I think you're right. Yep. Okay.
That's where I saw it. I knew
Yeah.
it was documentation somewhere.
Yeah. You're right. And so let's now build this again. And I'll use command line for it this time. And I'm gonna
Okay.
say, I did save it though. I saved it. Okay, good. And I will say, whoops, a little too much there. Let's go Docker build, and this will be 1.0.2. And it's going to build that. Yeah, go ahead.
So while that's building, why do you think it failed?
I think it failed because, where are we?
Oh, because 443 and we need HTTPS communication.
Yeah, that's what I
Okay.
think is happening. I think the HTTP redirection is blowing up. And I was trying to remember, did I have to put that in? I don't remember now. And I think that was it. But we will find out in just a second. So, because if that's not it, then I'm going to be really bummed because I felt like this was all going fine. So anyways, let's one One thing that I have struggled with, and maybe it's a good thing that this came up.
What's that?
I have struggled with changing the container here, and when it restarts, pulling the image that I wanted. I'm going to try it real quick, but if it doesn't work, we'll create another web app.
Okay.
And when I say that I've struggled, it worked the first time I did this, and then it didn't work after that, and I don't know why. So anyways, we have stopped. Everything is stopped. And I can go to configuration. And I can say, is it configuration? Am I wrong about that? I am probably wrong about that. It was probably deployment center, where I could say, I want 1.0.2.
Yeah.
And then save that. All right. And then I believe that all I have to do is go back and say start. And then what we should see, again, if we head to the logs, is we should see it. See, the interesting thing is I don't feel like it changed it. See that?
That's one. But the timestamps on those are still from
early. Okay, so I just need to maybe be more patient than I was. I probably wasn't patient. I was probably like, well, it didn't work. But you're right. It's 8:41, and this is saying 38.
And 8:41. Is there an error? Oh, no, I'm sorry. That's 38 and 41 seconds. No.
Yeah, we're still not there yet. It does say container image 1.0.2. I didn't think that I had to kick it off. I was pretty sure that, because like it says, it even tries to do a warm-up request.
Yep.
But I may do that anyway. And then let's go see back in deployment center again in the logs. See, it's just not, it's not doing it.
You got 42 now.
Image pull failed. Oh, I didn't push it up to Docker.
Oh.
Remember,
yeah,
I built.
Need to do that.
Yeah, I built, but I did not push. I didn't push it up to Docker Hub.
Yep.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll get this yet. All right. So we do see our newer 1242 stopped site because I couldn't pull the image. So it turns out that by just not paying attention, I have replicated all of the things that happened to me as I tried to do this. So let's go here. I don't know if restart would be fine.
You might. I don't know. I would think you'd probably have to go into the development center, but that could be me.
I don't know either. So let's go deployment center and the logs, and we're still at 1242. And what we'll do is we will
force a refresh on the web app.
It doesn't seem to be doing anything. It's possible that I needed to stop and then start. Another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start while this is, I want to see if this picks it up. I really do.
Okay.
But this is a good opportunity to also show that you don't have to use the portal. I know we haven't gotten it working in the portal yet, but it will. Is I am going to create a web app with the Azure CLI.
Mm-hmm.
And what was the other one called? It was TDTS Blazor app. So this is going to be Blazor app 2. And the plan is TDTS B1.ASP, I think.
Yep, that looks right.
And we need the resource group, which was tdt.blazor app.rg-rg, not dot dash.
Yeah, sounds right.
Okay. And then we need the deployment container image, which is I got that backwards. I need to say it's from Docker.io, and it's my namespace.
Mm-hmm.
And then Blazor 7 app 1.0.2.
Yeah.
And that I want it to be HTTPS only.
Okay.
So So there's a lot there. We could use Azure Pipelines support. We could use GitHub Action support, which we'll look into. But from the Azure CLI, I can get this going. And then let's go take a look back, see what's going on here. Okay, so more stuff has happened. And we got something down here that is really nice.
Nice.
Container. So our original deployment, because I finally got the image correct, it said downloaded newer image, and then it ran Docker, and then it tried a warm-up request, and then it connected to it. So now let's refresh this, and that's what we wanted. So this was, let's to be clear, this is the version from the portal. Just some different mistakes on my part. Number one, now we know for sure, expose 80 and 443. Number two, get the image correct. And number three, if you build a new image, make sure you push it to your registry before you try pulling it in your web app. Okay. Now let's go out to command line, where we deployed a second version of this to the same app service plan. So they're both living on the same, well, in my metaphor, living on the same web server.
Yep.
When this finishes, you get blah. And it's like, I don't know. This could have been JSON, by the way.
Right.
So it turns out that what you can do is you can say AZ web app. Let's do show instead of create. And I think you need the name, and I think you need the resource group. And I want to say that's all I need.
Yes.
I think that's right.
Because those two things will make it unique across. Usually, that will make it unique on your subscription.
Yeah. So the question would be that if I've started this web app, how do I know if it's up and running? Because remember, we're not using the portal. So when I run this command, watch what happens. I get that's a little hard to read as well.
Yeah.
Just so much has happened. I could have said output JSON. I could say this, but I feel like that's not fun either.
No.
So what I do is this, and again, I'm not trying to suggest that this is what you do when you're developing and learning, and then what you do is you get this in a pipeline. You get this in either GitHub Actions or Azure Pipeline or whatever you're using, and that's how you really deploy this stuff. But if you use this parameter query, you can basically tell it, just pull this out of the JSON that comes back and just show me that.
Right.
And I want you to show it to me in table form, by the way. And so what's coming back, I hope, should be, is that TDTS-Blazor app 2 is running. It only took the parameters I cared about. Now,
that's pretty cool.
I'm not trying to tell you that this is how you should do your day-to-day development in CI. It's that you're a developer. What I tend to do here is, instead of going to the portal to do stuff again and again and again and again, I kind of get a command that works, and I save this off into like plain old Notepad, whatever, so that way when I'm reiterating the process again and again, let me try that again. Well, command's done. I could have appended that -- query to the create.
Yeah.
So in fact, let's create a number 3 just to show that. I'm going to copy that. And so here's create, and we're going to have a third web app here. Same exact, everything's the same, except that we are going to add the query, so that way, I believe when this is done, and we'll come back here. It may finish very quickly though.
So instead of when we did number 2, website number 2, we wound up getting that table with all of the fields in it.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
and this should just be those 2 fields on the table.
Right.
Okay.
I'm hoping that it doesn't take too long. Like, let's go. It shouldn't take too long. Just because that way, as a developer, I could save that command off, and that way I get my state back and I get what I'm interested in. I could add more parameters to that. So anyways, we now have 3 Azure Web Apps running. Let's go see how that all looks. So let's go to our app service plan, which now, and I'll pick apps. I know I'm clicking around quite a bit. 3 apps in here.
Yep.
2 of them deployed through the Azure CLI. And let's see if we got it right. I didn't even go look at the logs in Deployment Center. Just went for it. And there it is. And just to TDTS-Blazor app 2. Nice. So these are all working. This is cool. We can deploy from a container. We should be able to update the web app. We could use a command to update. We could go to the portal. We could, so that as we push new images, we can update those. And then again, you know what's really going to happen? We're going to get this into CI/CD so that new images are pushed. And that's what you're really going to do. But, you know, just to get things started, sometimes it's easier to do that. But let's do one more thing before we go, I think.
Okay.
Let's see if we can get it done. Here we are. It's always, you know how it is, the last 10 minutes. It's like we should have, I bet you we could have the last 10 minutes like sponsored. It's the frenzy to do one more thing. What I'm doing, and I'm doing it off screen just because I'm sure folks can imagine this is somewhat sensitive, is I am logging into my domain name registrar.
Okay.
And we are going to try see if we can get a domain name on one of these working HTTPS with a certificate. Can we do it in 10 minutes? So we'll do it in the portal. I would actually like to figure out how to do this outside the portal, but I don't know how at the time. Let's use Blazor app 2.
Okay.
Doesn't matter. And we'll go to custom domains. Okay. Without doing anything, Azure Web Apps automatically supports your app name with a certificate, and you don't have to do anything for that. That just works. That's cool. But I imagine that most people probably have a domain name that they kind of care about and want to use. So I am going to do just that. Now, this website is not going to stay up. It just so happens, like a lot of developers, I have a bunch of domain names that I probably don't use.
Don't need, yeah.
That I don't really need. So what I'm doing is I am setting up here. I see how much I can show, but I'm getting my advanced DNS set up. Okay, so that I can punch in these DNS values. So we're going to say add custom domain. And there's 2 ways to do this. I can use an app service domain if I wanted to.
Right.
A lot of people watching this might already have a favorite provider, so we're going to use another provider. I am going to use an app service managed certificate, which is a cool service that basically is just going to create the certificate. It's going to bind it. It doesn't cost anything. It's going to renew it. I don't have to think about it anymore. Okay. Kind of nice. And the domain I'm going to use, I do happen to have this domain. But let's make it www. Okay. Now, when you do this, it tells you, now everybody watching is going to see like, oh, that's like a big old secret. Well, that's fine because this is all getting deleted. So I feel pretty confident about that. Like if somebody really hurried, I don't know. I don't know if it would work because I don't know. I mean, I own the domain, so I feel confident that this is okay. But I am copying these values into my domain name registrar. They go live pretty quickly. I was happy with how quickly it went live. So I'm basically making a CNAME record, and I'm making, I know this feels like you're watching on the radio, and I'm making a TXT record with that exact host value, ASUID. What does this do? Like, do you have an explanation for what the purpose of this is? We're guessing. I mean,
yeah, I do not.
It's proving that I own the domain, basically.
Oh, all right. Well, that makes sense.
I'm telling Azure, when you go to www.spaceshot.net, when you go there, they're saying, okay, well, here, put in these records.
Okay.
Number 1, to prove that this is the website you want us to host with the certificate. And this little code is just proving you own it.
Okay. If it can get there, then you've got the right.
Right. So I'm going to click validate. Hopefully I talked long enough for it to be effective. So it did. It might take a little bit longer. It was so quick last time. Like I clicked validate a couple times and then it worked and I was super excited. But they are in there. Oh, there it is. Validation passed. select add, and I bet you all of this is like, maybe this is okay. Don't worry, we'll delete the web app later. And so here we go. Now I get in custom domains. Well, that's great, but you haven't done any, like you didn't add a binding, right? So
Yeah.
they basically say, I know you look at this and you go, okay, add binding. And they go, well, you obviously want a new certificate. And it's like, yeah, I do. And why don't you just create me an app service manager certificate? So it walks you through it.
Okay.
And oh, well, it might have actually, it's funny because it's failing on me. I wonder if it was working on something. The point is, it says it's secured.
It does now, yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if I didn't have to do that step. And maybe I'm just in a hurry. So we know that the app is here. And I guess I should have changed the app in some way so that we would be able to say, but I can also come to it now at my domain name. And I've got, let me zoom in. I didn't want to zoom in that way. There's a way for me to zoom in and it still works. So connection is secure. Site has a valid certificate. We can look at the cert, and there it is. It's going to be good until next year.
Nice.
And it all just works, right? Everything just it was really cool. It was really cool to get to that step. Again, I think like we saw, there was I ran into some hiccups and stuff, but we got through all of them.
And this gets us around what we were doing a few weeks ago with Let's Encrypt. Is that the right one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And using their certificates to do this, there are services essentially built into Azure from the looks of it that let you do that kind of capability, which is awesome.
Yeah, that's right. And that's totally free, and it renews it for you. And the old TDTS website is using Let's Encrypt. Now, don't get me wrong. If you watch that show, I was fumbling around for like, well, where was that code? And I actually found all of that. So I might actually go back to that show and update the show notes with, here was where the code was, and here's the web job. And I think the right move would be to create an Azure web job and have it renew the certificate every 60 days, because Let's Encrypt is 90-day certificates. And then that would be fine. But the fact of the matter is part of what we're doing on the show is we are rebuilding the website. And so that's the way forward, is going to be with Azure. What was that called? Managed certificate service, something like that. So we did a lot of stuff. We built a new app. Yeah. We instead of just exploring, we could have done this show and just used all the tooling, and that would have been perfectly fine. And I do think, to your original question, the tooling's a great way to learn. Like, I got to look at this Docker file, and then I sort of deconstructed it to try and learn what it's doing. I don't understand all of it still.
Right.
But as a developer, I feel like, okay, I'm a little smarter. Learned how to use the command line to build and push those images, even run them interactively. And then you can develop in this container. You can set breakpoints in this container. You can send it up to Azure Web Apps. And if you don't want to use the portal, we've got command line. It's all here. It's it ends up being pretty productive. Like, we did all that in a little bit over an hour. So a little over, right?
Yeah, definitely. Not much long, like 20 minutes.
And that's even with the mistakes, right? And seeing
and
how when you make a mistake, you get help in the portal. Look at the logs. Just be more patient than I am. Stuff like that.
Awesome. So that's cool. So we have, a good foundation, and I think we have some schedule challenges for tomorrow, but as I posted on the YouTube channel, I've been starting to use the YouTube posting, and there's a question up there for folks if you're interested about, helping with some direction and where we want to go next. But posted that, we're trying to put a couple shows out this week. I think we're trying to do the next one Wednesday morning. It looks kind of good for right now. So as long as all of that stays, schedule stay good, we'll see you all in a couple days.
Yeah, the plan is Wednesday, and I think the question was, do we want to look more at identity or stream rendering?
Yep.
We kind of need both. And certainly one of the things we want to have in the new website is we want to have an admin section. So we're going to need to be able to log in.
Yeah, definitely.
And
So
then
it's a nice
maybe,
one to tackle.
yeah, I think we want to get our CI/CD foundation going so that we're not kind of, we figure out how to use this stuff, but get it so that we can build an image, push it, get it deployed, maybe use deployment slots for blue green. I don't know. We'll see what
Yeah.
makes sense for the site. But yeah.
Awesome.
But I don't know about you folks, but it
Underway.
is 9:00 here on the East Coast, which means it's time for stand up. And hopefully you got a nice sip of morning coffee or tea or whatever you wanted to drink this morning, and maybe learned a little and had some fun. And if you did, please join us on YouTube at youtube.com/The Dev Talk Show, or on Twitter at The Dev Talk Show, or on Twitch, twitch.tv/The Dev Talk Show. All the replays are on YouTube. Leave us comments. Anything you want to say about this, if you've used it, if you like it, tell us what you enjoy, and where you'd like us to go next. Hit like and subscribe. Thank you all very much for watching. We definitely had some folks watching today and really appreciate you watching us live. And for Rich, I'm Chris, and we'll see you next time on The Dev Talk Show.